Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today we got some pretty interesting news in regards to the way that Blizzard wants to address endgame content in terms of Mythic Plus as well as Dungeons. They are essentially reformatting how Dungeons are going to work, or at least reward gear, in the next patch, which is pretty exciting news, and it's honestly long overdue. So we're going to jump into exactly what they're doing, break it down, and hopefully explain it. But overall, I just think this is really exciting. So let's just dive into this post. So this was announced at the time of recording this like 5 hours ago. I saw this when I was on my lunch break at work, but I just got home now. So TLDR, they are essentially upgrading or trying to reduce the gap between Mythic Zero content and Mythic Plus content. They essentially are doing essentially like a reward squish to try to bring everything closer in line, to hopefully encourage players to do Mythic Plus and also encourage players to do Mythic Zeros and Heroic Dungeons, which is really, really good because what's happened over the course of years, especially once Mythic Plus was introduced, is that the rewards are just not rewarding. For example, you can log in to current WoW as a fresh character, pretty much a fresh 70, and as long as you have a little bit of gold in your pocket or even enough money, in the real world to buy a WoW token, you can pretty much skip over most of the end game like content. That's not necessarily progression content, but stuff to do. So heroic dungeons still drop embarrassingly low loot, and so M0s are essentially pointless. But basically what Blizzard is going to be trying to do is they're going to upgrade the heroic rewards to what is the current M0 rewards, and then M0s will now drop M0 loot, as well as it's another way to acquire crests, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that's somewhat of the TLDR. There's some more stuff about end of dungeon rewards and vault rewards in terms of Mythic Plus, but I'm going to get to that in a bit. So basically jumping into it, the main thing and the reason why Blizzard's doing this is they feel like they've identified three core issues. And that's that heroic dungeons outside of maybe like leveling or right when you hit max level, they become pretty much irrelevant almost instantly, which is not good, right? And then another thing that they've identified in this, according to this article, is that M0 dungeons are basically, they lose relevance after the first few weeks into an expansion, which we saw obviously very early on. People did their M0 world tours for the first 2 weeks. The Mythic Plus season came out, and now you can pretty much jump from doing normal and heroic dungeons right when you hit max level, and you can just jump into plus twos, and there's no reason to actually go and do the Dragonflight M0 dungeons. Essentially what Blizzard is trying to do is they want to make there to be a relevant endgame for players that doesn't have like a time restriction, right? Some players out there and don't enjoy Mythic Plus because they feel like there's a lot of pressure to perform well, to do damage, and it just doesn't really satisfy them. And I think that's fair. And there should be a casual endgame for players to progress without being on that restrictive timer. So essentially what they're doing is, I'm going to try to make this picture bigger. So essentially what Blizzard is trying to do is, this is the current progression system of Mythic Plus gear. You have normal dungeons, small jump up you have heroic, small jump up you have M0, and then you just start progressing, and there's all these gaps, and these are different breakpoints of item level and rewards. So what Blizzard's now doing is they're knocking heroic up to the quality of M0. M0 is now going to be a reward structure for some gear as well as crests. And they're trying to basically reduce the gap from acquiring Drake crests to Worm crests to Aspect crests. So now you only have to go up to Mythic plus 10 to start achieving those crests. So I think this is healthier for the game. It's going to be one of those things that we're going to definitely have to test out. This will be active in Season 4, and I'm hoping with appropriate feedback, we either address the issues during Season 4. It's a good time to test this, so it doesn't obviously be a negative experience in 11.0, the War Within, or if it is a good experience, they can continue adapting on this. So all in all, normal difficulty is going to be unchanged. Heroic, the tuning and the rewards are going to be increased to the baseline of M0 content. So for casual players who like to just gear alts, or they don't like to have the pressure of Mythic Plus and up against the timer, you can now do harder content and gain higher rewards outside of just world questing and upgrading things through there, or doing essentially raid finder. And heroic, similar to how it works now, is going to be queuable, so you can just use the group finder, which makes me think that they're trying to move and get a solo queue system for Mythic Plus, but that's a topic for a different day. So the tuning and rewards of Mythic 0 are now going to be increased to the equivalent of a +10 dungeon with affixes in the current system. Now, of course, there is no timer for M0s, there's no affixes, or there's any kind of limitations. So you're allowed to change talents and stuff inside the dungeon. The idea that they really are trying to tackle is they want to make M0 dungeons feel like an actual progression experience for all players from all walks of life. Now, of course, for people who are pushing high Mythic Plus, a +10 difficulty is pretty much nothing, but it now gives people beyond the heroic difficulty to really chase after some higher level rewards without feeling the burden of, again, that timer and a lot of group pressure, because with the timer, and that might be one attribute to why people might be toxic and might judge your DPS or your route or etc. And then, of course, there's always going to be a Mythic 0 lockout. So once you complete the dungeon 1 week, you're going to be locked out, so you can't go back in there. And then they're going to add Drake Crests into this, which is good. And then, of course, we can come full circle to the Mythic Plus system. They will still have rewards up to level 10, starting at the +2, like you normally would have it. But a +5 should now be just as hard as a +15. So just like previous seasons, the difficulty is going to shift up. And a 10 should be a 20. So there's about a 10 level difference between this. And now they're going to be adding affix slots at the +2, +5, and +10 level. So essentially, they're really squishing down on the level of keys and the difficulty of those keys. This means their theory is that there should be a smaller range of keystone levels to essentially find groups and have a more meaningful progression between each level, which again, we're going to have to see how it works in season 4. And I'm glad they're kind of testing something new, not during a new expansion, but instead at the end of an expansion where you can kind of throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. So last but not least, they do talk about kind of the reward structure here. Now there's a lot to kind of crisscross analyze, but essentially normal dungeons will now start dropping 460 gear in the next season. Heroic dungeons will do equivalent of what M0 is now, but we're going to be seeing it at 476 item level. So essentially just doing heroic dungeons can get you equivalently heroic geared from this season, from season 3. And then following that, we're going to start seeing M0s be at 489 and above. So M0s for next patch will pretty much replace any gear you currently have, especially if it's some specific like BIS trinkets and whatnot. And then after that, it's going to progress like normal. Now to really max out your vault, all you have to do is a +10. And for rewards at the end of keys, pretty much 10s and 11s are where they're going to peak out. And then, yeah, you're just doing a +10 in next season is going to reward you 522 gear, which is going to be great. Again, we're going to have to see what the difficulty scaling is going to look like. If they are really trying to squish it down, it means that, you know, a +10 is going to be equivalent to a +20. So it's still going to be hard. It's not making anything easier. They're just kind of squishing the gap between the highest end and the lowest end. And finally, last but not least, we do have, they are addressing crests and flight stones because of the restructure of M0 and squishing the difficulty between, you know, a +2 and a +10. They're going to have to figure out rewards a little bit. So flight stones are going to be similar to the last season. Nothing's really going to change outside of maybe depending on each level. They're going to go up a little bit more because there's an equivalency scale. There will still be bonus flight stones when anyone in your party does get Mythic Plus score from completing the key, but they are no longer going to have whelp crests come from Mythic Plus. And I think personally, this is a great change. I think it should really be some of the higher crest sources. So things like Worm and Aspect should primarily come from that. Now they are saying players will earn 10 Drake crests on successful completion of a Mythic 0, as there is no timer to beat. So you're not going to, it doesn't matter obviously if you fail or beat it, but if you clear the M0 dungeon, you're going to get Drake crests. Now I do see a small problem with this. Depending on the upgrade path for every item level of gear, Drake crests are primarily used to kind of get yourself going, and it being now limited and not really farmable, it's now being capped. So right, you're going to want to do an M0 tour to get Drake crests if you need Drake crests, or you're going to have to raid, where before you can just do anywhere between a +5 and a +9. So this is a little bit of a cause for concern. Again, we have to see what the upgrade paths look like exactly. And now starting from +2, you're going to start earning Worms crests until you get to +5, which again should equal a +15. And then Aspect crests will be anything from a 6 and higher. And the same quantities are still going to exist from dungeons. If I'm not mistaken, you get 12 if you time it, you get 5 if you fail. So all in all, I think, I'd like to think the optimist in me believes that this might be a good system, I think squishing down the rewards as well as the level of gear, the level of keys that people can complete will be better. You know, when you go into Group Finder, you'll find, I mean, people are listing obviously like 2s all the way up to like 30s in the Group Finder. And sometimes it's difficult to really hone in. The idea is that they want to have a bigger pool of keys for people to choose from. So by squishing down the levels of that, it should make it that, you know, if you're someone who really wants to chase after some +9s, there should be a plethora of +9 keys in the queue from all the dungeons you could possibly need. Instead of, sometimes I'll search plus like 13 to 13. Let's say I'm on a new alt trying to farm gear, or I'm looking just for like 20s for vault. Sometimes the list is quite short. And that's not necessarily from the amount of players who are doing keys versus not doing keys, but the fact that the range is from 2 to 30 instead of being from 2 to 15 or something like that. So I'm hoping that this will help. I'm excited to see how it works. I'm optimistic. It's the biggest thing that I want to see from Blizzard in Season 4 specifically is that they're trying something new, getting feedback, and then using that feedback, whether good or bad, to catapult and launch that into the new expansion, making the game better. What I like about them doing something like this in a Season 4 is people play the season. Not as many people play PTR, and not as many people play Alpha and Beta. And getting a, you know, big community feedback on systems like this is only going to benefit everyone involved. So that's this. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're still waiting on 10.2.6. I don't know if that's come out yet. I've just been at work all day. I just got home. So we'll see. I'm pretty excited for Season 4, and the alpha for The War Within should be right around the corner. So hopefully we'll start seeing some cool content. Anyways, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.